Disclaimer: this video is of humorous nature only. The author does not seek to insult or humiliate anyone. The video may contain profanity. People under the age of 16 should refrain from watching this video. Story 1. Good ones covered here. So one I want to add among the others is a cookie-cutter approach across multiple siblings. Like, what works for your first child might not work for your other kids, or vice versa. Each sibling has a different experience and a different dynamic, if anything, by the sheer existence of the others. Plus, personalities are sometimes a random draw, so one kid might be sodic, another moody, and another stoic until they hit puberty. And it might not even be chemical, but just their own experiences outside the home. They have lives you don't even know about. Say you have two twin boys. Because I want to name them something obvious, their names are Goofus and Gallant. You believe you treat them the same. But Goofus has a few incidents with a bully that he gets blamed for in second grade. Gallant didn't. But you don't know that. Goofus's grades start to drop. Gallant does very well, which Goofus resents. As a result, both boys start to push away from one another and define their individuality as not the other twin. Gradually, Goofus becomes an arrogant slob. Gallant becomes some kind of model student who wears a starched shirt to school. You give them the same chores, the same things, the same treatment, but both start to react very differently, which forces you to discipline Goofus more despite being fair to both. Goofus develops a hatred for authority, an endless spiral of bad behavior. Authority figures hate him, which causes more bad behavior. Meanwhile, Gallant starts to suffer anxiety and stress due to an overdependence on being perfect. You don't notice because you're paying too much attention to Goofus. I never have to worry about you, Gallant. This adds to Gallant's stress, and he's feeling neglected on top of that. Now, both kids are very different from one another. Their issues have to be approached in different ways. But they're twins. They got those psychic connections whatever twins have or something. Nope. Each kid is a snowflake or nature, nurture, and experiences. No one philosophy fits all. Story 2. One of the funnier mistakes my dad made, he wasn't able to find the yellow pages once. This around the early 1990s. He asked one of us kids to dial 411 so he can get the number for a local shop as he needed items for a cookout during the summer holiday. I was about 5 or 6 at the time and still learning my shapes. I mistook one of the numbers for another. When I got a call through, I had a strange talk with some random woman before one of my older siblings took the phone as I was taught stranger danger. That sibling noticed who it was and hung up before dialing 411. About a few minutes later, a police officer was at the front of the door at our apartment building, explaining about a dropped 911 call. Dad had the look of embarrassment and explained about the misdial. Yet, for random chance, a neighbor came over and asked the police officer if he can help with a child after a bee attack. Luckily, child ended up being okay. I later learned about what I did but didn't get in trouble because they understood I was still too young. Understand what the difference was. Pro tip, when it comes to missed calls to 911, the police rather handled those done by accident or a false alarm than those by a prank. We also learned there was a separate line for non-emergency, like being asked to do a safety check. Story 3. In this day and age, I think it's screen time. We had one TV in the living room as I was growing up, and my mom obviously had first choice, and it was always something boring, like the news, so us kids chose to play in our rooms or go outside and play and socialize. These days, parents give their babies their iPhones, and as soon as they become a toddler, they get their own iPad? That is wild to me. Kids are being raised by screens that are inches away from their faces. They're not learning how to be bored. They're not being forced to be creative and imaginative. Their parents are ignoring them so they can get some quiet time while not realizing that they're teaching their kid what it's like to get instant gratification. Kids aren't learning how to talk or regulate their emotions. They literally don't know how to play or socialize because they're just on screens all day. They are becoming addicted to their screens. Just like their parents. It's creating people who have no idea how to live life. Story 4. viewing their children as a wallet and comparing them to others. For context, my mother is an immigrant from Vietnam with the mindset of, I've sacrificed for you, so you need to do the same for the family. As a child who grew up poor, I bought into that and chose a stable, well-paying career that I don't enjoy for this goal. Now, as an adult with more financial literacy, it's taken a toll. For example, my mom refuses to open a retirement account, which she can max out each year and still live comfortably, because she knows my siblings and I will care for her. Any talk of an IRA leads to the sacrifice and how her coworkers' children bought their parents a house speech. My partner and I chose not to have children, partly because we are aware that my mom will have high healthcare needs in the future. Overall, I feel like I've paused my happiness for the sake of my family. Story 5. Parents acting like your best friend and not your parent. My mom has disappointed me for many years for not stepping up as a mother figure. She had me as a teenager, and she still acts like one. I realized that in order to keep the relationship I have with her, I can never ever expect her to show up for me as a mom, but I can expect her to show up as my friend. Obviously, therapy helped me get to this point, but it damaged me for many years expecting her to one day fill the mom role. We have a much better relationship now that I have accepted she will never fill the role. I do my best to accept her as she is and what it must have been like to have a child so young and alone. Story 6. Not a parent here, but I read an interesting one not long ago in a book about PTSD. Overwhelming your baby is a thing, and it can cause lasting trauma. Babies, like the human beings that people tend to forget they are, have a certain tolerance for having other people in their space. But it's very easy for adults to not know this or to ignore it. If parents relentlessly get into a baby's face and offer it no respite, the baby has no idea what's wrong or how to process this. It's hardwired to need parental protection, but at the same time it's terrified. It cries to make the situation stop, but that only makes the parents go harder. The result is that a baby which was fine becomes one with fearful attachment or other issues. Story 7. I think the biggest mistake parents make without realizing it is forgetting that they still have options for a better life somewhere, and the way having a happy family can feel. I think they forget how powerful family can be in getting through hard times and how resilient kids are. I see some of my friends' moms refuse to go back to college, stand up to their partner shop and pray their kids help them out later because they think they'd fall apart without a breadwinner or that it would make everything they've become null. I think this is something both my parents represented for me growing up, even while divorced. I see other families settle and I actually feel bad for them, even though as a kid they treated me like I had less. Story 8. I have no doubt that my parents love me in their own way, but a lot of my childhood was spent learning that I wasn't worth effort. I learned to stop asking to go to after-school clubs, for example, because it was too much effort to pick me up an hour later. I'm still trying to undo it, but the idea that I'm not worth people's time or effort is deeply rooted. Story 9. Thinking that their kids will make the same life choices as they did, so not ever discussing with them. Other choices, consequences of those choices, dangers of those choices, etc. People who were brought up in religious homes and were told, no intimate before marriage. That's fine, but there also needs to be discussions about if they do decide to have intimate before marriage. What that looks like, what could potentially happen, pregnancy, STD, etc. Don't just assume that your child will also be a virgin until marriage and not prepare them for what the alternative looks like. Story 10. Spoiling them by giving them too much stuff and not teaching them to work and participate in the household chores and other efforts. It needn't be too heavy. They have schoolwork and are young and need time to grow and play. But some of our self-esteem comes from a job well done and the recognition that goes with it. Teens especially should not be sitting around or having all their time to themselves while parents labor tirelessly. Makes them think the world revolves around them. All parents need help and children must grow and develop into useful adults with practical skills. Story 11. Not teaching your kids to be independent. So many parents foster hugely codependent relationships that are crippling to college students and young adults. Having independent kids means you cannot give them everything. They should find a part-time job to save money for post-graduation while still in high school. If your adult kid requires financial assistance in any way, they are not an independent adult. Do not let them pretend otherwise. Letting your dependent pseudo-adult cosplay, being an independent adult is extremely damaging. The longer it goes on, the more difficult it becomes for that child to find true independence. Story 12. People give me grief for this, but I think using chores as punishment is a great formula to raise a slob. Chores should be portrayed as a part of life. They're what you do to maintain a clean living space, maintain your stuff, and ultimately make things easier. Having negativity built into them will make them be avoided. Story 13. My fiancée never heard the words "I love you" from her dad, and it ducked her up. She tells me that she knows he loved her, as his actions showed her, but he never said it once in over 80 years. She says it to her kids all the time now, and knowing this, I never ever let a day go by before I remind her that I love her too. Story 14. Not letting their young kids help. Yes, it's faster and easier to do it yourself and your toddler. Child won't do it well or might make more work to clean up, but it's so important to let them. This is setting up good behavior for the future. People raise their kids never letting them help, and the kids lose interest in helping. So when they are old enough where the parent finally thinks they should help out, they don't want to anymore. Story 15. Marrying the wrong person and making babies with them, hoping it'll fix their marriage, only to end up both of them being abusive to their children in some way. Narcissist and enabler relationship, not taking care of their health when such worst could have been prevented, being stubborn and not continuing with medication, and now paying the price for it, and the children have no choice but to see that suffering and taking the burden. Story 16. Talking about their own insecurities, such as body type, and making their children feel the same about their bodies. My mother never liked her legs, or having them out, made me think as a child young adult that I shouldn't like my legs. I would always wear thick black tights to school even in summer. I have since learned that it wasn't my insecurities, it was just something taught to me on accident. Story 17. Marrying each other, my mom could have done so much better. They got married since grandparents wanted my father out from the house. Then mom also decided they had dated long enough, so it's either marriage or separation. My father was someone who would prolong and continue generational trauma. I really think mom could have had a better life without him. Yet she is doing her best to love him even after he died. Story 18. Their whole means of conflict resolution means just acting mad and cutting people off, sometimes for years. Most times the offender didn't even know they had said or done something that hurt their feelings or was otherwise the wrong thing. This, along with the hypercriticism of any thought or action that didn't align exactly with their ideas, certainly took a while to unlearn so much bad interactions and relations with friends and family. Story 19. Teaching them about consequence. The longer you let this one go, the more expensive the negative consequences of their actions. If a kid messes up and they get in trouble with mom and dad, it's a whole different game when they are adults and they get in trouble with the law or make a single decision that affects their entire lives. Parenting is like balancing multiple spinning plates on a single stick. Story 20. Not apologizing to their children after they are in the wrong. Nobody really apologized to me when I was younger, so the smallest mistake I'm so sorry I didn't mean it. My boyfriend's parents usually apologize, and when I do my "I'm so sorry," they're just like, "You mean you're fine? It's my fault." Story 21. Letting them quit something like learning to ride a bike because they got hurt. They are likely to quit other things, like asking someone out, because they got hurt. I am sure it's hard to see your kids cry because they fell and scraped their elbow, but they're going to be fine, and getting back on even if they're scared will build self-confidence when they achieve their goal. Story 22. Taking their insecurities out on their children. I was eating an unhealthy snack when my mom walked in and said, "We're going to have to roll you out the door if you keep eating like that." It's the same thing she's eaten many times before, but I apparently wasn't allowed to. I didn't eat for 3 days. Story 23. Something I know I have done is just doing things because I was too impatient for her to figure it out, or I didn't have the money or time to fix it if she messed it up. It's okay. I'll just do it. Mostly with cooking, but there are things she's learned how to do later than her friends because of my impatience. Story 24. Not letting their kids fail or make mistakes. Failure and mistakes are how we learn. Let your kid not make the team, not pass a class, not be picked for whatever they tried out for. It's character building and teaches them how to handle disappointment at a young age. Otherwise, they grow up to be dysregulated adults who scream at cashiers at Kroger. Story 25. Disciplining their special needs child? 'Cause yeah, they didn't understand, but if you teach them it's okay to throw a tantrum in a store when they're a child, they're going to grow up and think it's okay, and are going to be very overwhelmed and confused why these random people are touching them and yelling at them, which will make everything 10 times worse. Story 26. Listen to literally any parenting advice that came from boomers or older, back when they thought you should just ignore a crying baby. Yeah, no, that doesn't teach them to stop crying because it's wrong. It teaches them crying is useless and not to trust you when they need help and you get a sociopath. Amazing how crap like that works. Story 27. Trying to not make the same mistakes their parents made with them with their own children, and not realizing their children are individuals. And by trying to make up for their own childhood, they make mistakes with their children by not treating them as individuals, and trying to experience the childhood they wanted through their own children. Story 28. I was a parent. Kids are grown and in their early 30s now. I have identified 2 areas of mistakes I made, probably equally a problem. 1. Being too lenient and letting them do far more than was beneficial. 2. Being overly strict and keeping them from doing some stuff that may have been beneficial. Story 29. Having children for the wrong reasons. Children may grow up to be nothing like you. They will eventually be independent adults who make their own mistakes in addition to sometimes yours. If you can't handle shaping that and eventually dealing with the consequences, both good and bad, then don't have them. Story 30. Not allowing them to experience negative emotions of any kind. Feelings of anger, disappointment, sadness, etc. are inevitable. And instead of teaching effective coping mechanisms, a lot of parents will just give kids whatever they want or blame something else for an outcome so they don't feel anything bad. Thank you all for watching. Watch even more great stories on my channel.